Hi, and welcome to the DOJ Investigation into the January 6 attack FAQs. In this first segment, I will answer the most frequently asked question I get. Why is the DOJ taking so long with the investigation into the insurrection? Variations include, why didn't the DOJ begin looking at the higher-ups involved in the attack until well into 2022? The January 6th congressional hearings in the summer of 2022 jump-started the DOJ and finally got Merrick Garland moving. And what about the Washington Post piece that proved the DOJ did nothing for a full year? I will answer this question and the variations by showing you some of what we learned about the investigation through 2021 and 2022. But first, a word about how the DOJ is going about the investigation. In a speech given on January 5, 2022, Merrick Garland explained how the DOJ was conducting the investigation. He said this: "Everyone in this room and on these screens is familiar with the way we conduct investigations, particularly complex investigations. We build investigations by laying a foundation. We resolve more straightforward cases first because they provide the evidentiary foundation for more complex cases. Investigating the more overt crimes generates linkages to less overt ones. Overt actors and the evidence they provide can lead us to others who may also have been involved, and that evidence can serve as the foundation for further investigative leads and techniques. In circumstances like those of January 6, a full accounting does not suddenly materialize. To ensure that all those criminally responsible are held accountable, we must collect the evidence. We follow the physical evidence. We follow the digital evidence. We follow the money. Over 40 years ago, in the wake of the Watergate scandal, the Justice Department concluded that the best way to ensure the department's independence, integrity, and fair application of our laws, and therefore the best way to ensure the health of our democracy, is to have a set of norms that govern our work." Now, here is something Garland said on July 22, 2022. "We do not do our investigations in public. This is the most wide-ranging investigation and the most important investigation that the Justice Department has ever entered into. We have to get this right." Okay, so these investigations do not happen in public for a range of reasons, including the fact that secrecy is necessary to protect the investigation and to shield witnesses. Now for some facts. As of January 1st, 2022, more than 700 people had been indicted for participating in the attack on the Capitol. Charges included using a deadly or dangerous weapon, causing serious bodily injury to an officer, entering a restricted area with a dangerous or deadly weapon, destruction and theft of government property, corruptly obstructing, influencing, or impeding an official proceeding, and more. Notice, all these crimes were at the ground level. The defendants had entered the Capitol and were often caught on tape, committing crimes. This is the low-hanging fruit, or what Garland called the overt crimes. On January 15th, 2022, we learned from a defense lawyer, Rob Jenkins, who was representing a few of the insurrectionists, that the DOJ had been, quote, "pretty aggressive," close quote, in seeking out information that points to others' involvement and culpability in planning the events of January 6th, including Rudy Giuliani and Roger Stone. Okay, let's stop right here and address the question, why didn't the DOJ begin looking at the higher-ups involved in the attack until well into 2022? Well, as of January 2022, we had reporting that the DOJ was looking at Rudy Giuliani and Roger Stone, members of Trump's inner circle and certainly people who count as higher-ups. Now, let's continue on. On March 2nd, 2022, the DOJ secured its first conviction for seditious conspiracy for Joshua James. He was the leader of the Alabama chapter of the Oath Keepers. Now, seditious conspiracy means attempting to overthrow or oppose the authority of the government by force. This was by far the most serious charge so far. And James was not at the Capitol during the riot, so it was also a step toward less overt crimes. Now, this is important. His plea deal required him to cooperate with prosecutors, including testifying before a grand jury. Also note, Joshua James was in Roger Stone's hotel room the morning of the insurrection. Okay, on March 30th, 2022, we learned that, quote, "in the past 2 months, a federal grand jury in Washington, D.C. has issued subpoena requests to some officials in former President Donald Trump's orbit who assisted in planning, funding, and executing the January 6 rally. A word about grand juries. This is from the DOJ page. After the prosecutor studies the information from investigators and the information they gather from talking with the individuals involved, the prosecutor decides whether to present the case to a grand jury. In other words, a grand jury is not the starting point. Moreover, because grand juries are shrouded in secrecy, we don't usually get leaks until the DOJ moves past interviewing the witnesses who want to be there and move on to the witnesses who are in trouble or are subjects or targets of the investigation. April 8th, 2022. Ali Alexander, a guy who was heavily involved in planning the Stop the Steal rally, he was at the Capitol but never entered, received a subpoena from a federal grand jury seeking information about members of the executive and legislative branches who were involved with the insurrection itself or the plot to obstruct the transfer of power. April 27th, 2022. We learned that Proud Boys member Louis Enrique Colon, who had helped plan the attack, was cooperating with prosecutors as part of a plea deal. Now, sometime in April 2022, DOJ investigators received the phone records of key officials and aides in the Trump administration, including Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows. We didn't learn about this until July, but it happened on April 22nd. On June 22nd, 2022, FBI agents searched the home of Jeffrey Clark, a former Justice Department official. He was one of the guys who tried to help Trump overthrow the leadership in the DOJ so they could overturn the election. Also, on June 22nd, federal authorities seized the cell phone of John Eastman. Eastman was the former law professor who wrote that memo on how Pence could overturn the election. It takes time to gather the evidence for a search warrant, particularly if you want to search a lawyer, because special procedures and laws apply to lawyers because of attorney-client privilege. Now, on June 10th, 2022, the January 6th Congressional Committee held its first public hearing. These hearings continued until October. We can stop here to address the comment that the January 6th congressional hearings in the summer of 2022 jump-started the DOJ and finally got Merrick Garland moving. Wrong. So far, everything on the timeline happened before the start of the January 6th congressional hearings. Now, if you want a more complete timeline on the investigation from 2021 to the present, you can find it on my website under a tab called The Criminal Investigations. Now, let's address this variation. But what about that Washington Post article that offered proof that the DOJ did nothing for a full year? Here were the headlines for that piece. FBI resisted opening probe into Trump's role in January 6 for more than a year. And the subheading, in the DOJ's investigation of January 6, key justice officials also quashed an early plan for a task force focused on people in Trump's orbit. Here's how one writer interpreted the Washington Post article. The GOP tried to intimidate the DOJ into doing nothing about January 6, and it worked. And here's an example of the reaction on social media. I hate that we've been right about Garland and the DOJ, and we took so much grief for it. Thank goodness for Smith now, but it is late in the game, at least 1 year lost. Obviously, from the timeline I've shown so far, you can see that a year was not lost, and the GOP did not succeed in intimidating the DOJ into doing nothing for a year. If you want a more complete breakdown of this Washington Post piece, see this, the Washington Post bombshell about Merrick Garland, on my website. You may still be wondering, why don't they just charge Trump now with what they have and keep investigating? Or surely they have enough evidence at this point to charge him. For answers to those questions and more, see the next segment of the DOJ investigation into the January 6 attack, FAQs. Thank you.